afternoon, my friends. This is Paul, and today I'm going to be reviewing to you Sonic Superstars for the Nintendo Switch. This is a brand new side-scrolling Sonic game that does not reuse any old zones. So this is not the next Sonic Generations, this is not the next Sonic Mania, it is an all-new project, and I am very happy that Sonic Team went with that direction, because as great as Sonic Mania and Sonic Generations were, they felt like they were more of throwbacks than full-on new levels. This has a new graphic style, all of the levels are new names, there are even some new gimmicks that to my knowledge haven't ever been seen in a Sonic game because consoles just didn't have the power to make that a reality. In case you haven't played a Sonic game, the gist of the gameplay is that they are platformers that revolve around moving as fast as you can. There's an element of speed running to it. A lot of the enemies and hazards and obstacles in the course are placed in such a way that it rewards players who use them to their advantage to try to build up more momentum. The entire game is done mostly with just one button. You use it to jump, you can hold down and then press it a bunch of times to spin dash, and some characters have additional abilities, but pretty much all of them are mapped to one button, so it keeps things nice and simple. You have 4 playable characters. There's Sonic, who's the everyday character. Pretty much the only distinct characteristic he has is that he can do the drop dash, which means that if you hold down the jump button and then land on a surface, Sonic will just keep spin dashing to maintain his momentum after getting on the ground. It has really helped a lot of the speedrunners out when it was first introduced in Sonic Mania. Then there's Tails, who can fly for a limited period of time. I didn't really like controlling him because I felt like his flight was too slow, and I wish that maybe the developers hadn't tried too hard to make him feel like, in the old games, I feel like he feels too much like he did on the Genesis, which I never thought I would say as a criticism, but the level design just doesn't seem accommodated for that kind of flight. Same with Knuckles. If you press the jump button again in the air, he can glide, he can also break through certain destructible walls, and he can also climb walls. But to make up for this seemingly overpowered move, he also has the lowest jump out of all the characters. He was slightly better than Tails, but I still only played as him when the level required me to. And finally there's Amy. Amy plays pretty much identical to how she did in Sonic Origins Plus. If you press the jump button in the air, she will swing around her hammer, which gives her extended range, which really helps in those boss fights. And if you continue holding the jump button down when she lands on the ground, she'll run forward, swinging her hammer back and forth, and she can use that to attack enemies and monitors coming up. One thing that's a little bit different from Sonic Origins Plus is that she can do a double jump. And I love characters that do double jumps, so as soon as I discovered that about Amy, I never picked another character again unless if, again, the level required it. There are actually only 1 level per character where you're absolutely required to play as that character, so the level is designed around that character's strengths and weaknesses. Some of you might be disappointed that there aren't more specialized levels, but I personally see that as a win-win, as if you don't like a certain character, you don't have to put up with them for too much longer. The rest of the game you can just play as whoever, and the levels have a whole bunch of different paths and assortments so that no 2 runs can be the same. 2D Sonic games typically had more of an exploration element to their levels, where even as far back as Sonic 1, there were often multiple pathways that you could choose, and Sonic Superstars really excels in that. There's often multiple layers of the level. Sometimes you can even go into the background, and I won't spoil too many other gimmicks, but let's just say that it's a game that constantly innovates and constantly tries to see how many more cool ideas it can throw at you. Now, most of the time Sonic has been a one-button game. Ever since the Genesis it's done that, but this game tries to do something a little bit different. In most Sonic games you get what are called Chaos Emeralds. Starting in Sonic 2, if you got all of them, it would let you become Super Sonic if you double jumped while you had 50 or more rings after collecting all of them. In this game, the Chaos Emeralds do something even if you only get 1, as each emerald corresponds to a different world, and each emerald has a unique power associated with it. So to select the power, you push the right stick in the correct direction. Think of the Pura Pad abilities in Tears of the Kingdom, and then after you've selected it, you press X to use it. You can technically do this whenever you want, but they only have a limited amount of time, and the only way to recharge them is to go through a checkpoint pole. The game is typically pretty generous about telling you when you really should use a special ability, as there might be a waterfall, and the game will say, hey, here's an opportunity for you to use your water ability to swim up this waterfall. I tried my best to not use these powers as much as possible because I felt like they kind of slowed down the pace. And especially with Sonic games trying to be so simple with their control schemes, it felt a bit cumbersome to stop the game, push the right stick in the right direction, and then press X at just the right time. It felt kind of counterintuitive to my Sonic-y brain. Thankfully, the rest of the game felt like a true love letter to those old titles, as the controls felt absolutely perfect, and a lot of the tricks that I had accumulated through my years of Sonic fanboyism worked perfectly fine. I felt like I was usually at fault if I died in the levels. They were a good mix between too easy and too challenging, so that it felt like it was just absolutely right. It might be a bit hard for people that are new to Sonic games, but people that are veterans are going to find that it's just as easy to speedrun, and then gradually ramps up the challenge as things go along. One thing I really like about this new Sonic game that's made it more accessible to newcomers is that you no longer have lives. So you can keep continuing from a check pull as much as you want. But you might be wondering, well, why do you need rings then if there are no longer lives? Well, every 100 rings that you get gives you a medal. There are other ways to earn medals as well. Sometimes after you go through a checkpoint pull, if you have 50 or more rings, you can jump into a portal that transports you to this like psychedelic type stage where it keeps rotating and you have to jump around the obstacles, and sometimes you can reverse the flow of the rotation, and you have to watch out for the Robotnik icons or else they'll automatically kill you. And these will give you a medal, actually quite a few medals after you complete them. And then there's also the other special stages which you can trigger by jumping through giant rings that you can find in the stage. And these help Switch owners feel like they're not missing out on anything that we didn't get the Spider-Man games, because as you see these little orbs in the sky, you can press the A button to like swing from them just like Spider-Man, and you have to try to catch up to the emerald that is running away from you. Sometimes you can have these giant trampolines that boost you higher, there are rings to collect. But what do these medals actually do? Well, once you're on the world map, you can go to a shop to customize a metal fighter. Unfortunately, this metal fighter can't be used in the main story mode, so I found that unless you're a really die-hard fan of the battle mode, it's kind of pointless. It feels like this could have been so much more, as Sonic Generations actually did have a full-blown shop where you could buy new powers and extra songs that you could play in the background of the levels, and this just lets you buy new parts for a robot that you can't even use in the main story. So what do you use your robot for if you can't use it in the main story? Well, there is a little surprise, but it is exclusive for a mode called Battle Mode. Those of you who are old school Sonic fans might be thinking, oh yeah, those little versus competitions where two players would play at the same time, where one would be on top of the screen, one would be on the bottom. This time around, it's basically a collection of mini-games where you play as a robot that has the same abilities as Sonic, and you do various challenges such as collecting enough stars, getting to the end of the goal, and of course it looks a lot like the Green Hill Zone, or defeating the other players. I only got through 3 rounds of this before I got sick and tired of it, because I didn't like the sluggish controls, and I didn't like the fact that you were playing against a whole bunch of other people. Thankfully, unlike games like Fall Guys and Splatoon and F-Zero 99, there's an offline component to this mode. You can play with bots, appropriate considering that they're all robots. I didn't script that. That was just an on-the-fly thing that I said. If there's a true competition mode, I don't know where it is. I do know that you can play simultaneous multiplayer in this game. Up to 4 people can play on the same screen. I haven't been able to test this, my friends weren't available when I was playing it, but I do think that's a nice compromise to the early days of Sonic multiplayer where Tails would always lag behind Sonic and he'd have to like automatically catch up if he fell too far behind. From what I've heard, this game is much more accommodating and allowing players to like actually keep up. I don't know how they managed to do that. Hopefully they take advantage of the Switch's portability and let like each player use their own screen. Overall, I think Sonic Superstars is a blast if you really like classic Sonic. If you don't, this might not change your mind that much, but I think even if you like 2D platformers in general, you're probably going to have a great time with this. One thing that I do think is a bit unfortunate is that 2D platformers lately have been really trying to push the boundaries of what's possible on a graphical level, and Sonic Superstars doesn't really do it for me. The character designs look pretty good. They look like they're slightly redesigned, but they still feel like they came straight out of a Sega Genesis while, you know, being in full 3D and being able to do all the advanced maneuvers that the new level geometry does. But the rest of the levels, I don't know, they look too much like they came out of the Wii, which is especially apparent on the world map where it feels very grainy as though the game's not even in HD. I don't think the graphics are like horrendous or Pokemon Scarlet and Violet levels of awful, as the game runs pretty well most of the time. I just think that the graphics could have been better, especially from what we've seen in Sonic Generations, which was on the Xbox 360. The Switch is technically more powerful than the 360, so I don't know what their excuse. If you want to use the Switch itself, Sonic Forces had side-scrolling levels, and they looked way better than any of the levels here. I also don't particularly like the music. I think it's okay if you're a sucker for old-school Sonic music, but I feel like it tries harder to be like Sonic 4 than it does the Genesis games, and so as a result, it lacks a lot of the personality and atmosphere that Sonic 3's music did. A lot of times it just feels like they composed a song because they thought it would be good for Sonic, but didn't think about the theme of the level and how it would fit in with what the level is going for and the action on screen. It just mostly feels pretty generic. I also am glad that you have the option to turn off the sound effects, because this game did get quite a bit of sensory overload for me, with there being lots more rings than typical in a Sonic game. This definitely feels like the new Super Mario Bros. 2 of the Sonic series, and I felt like the sound effects being turned off didn't really affect my enjoyment that much. Now, this game is $60. Is it worth that insane price for a brand new Sonic game? Depends on how much you like classic Sonic, because there are approximately 10 levels that are split into multiple acts. What I like is that not all levels have the same amount of acts, which may seem like a complaint, but I think it allows for quality over quantity. Some zones may only have one act, but that one act has a whole bunch of cool ideas. Or you might have a level that has 3 acts, but one of them has like a story point in one of its levels and requires a specific character in one of them. Some levels have a fruit level, where at the end of each act 2, you'll step on a monitor that can sometimes have a fruit icon appear, and if you pay 1 fruit, then you can get to kind of a high score attack level where you try to collect as many rings as possible and just see how good you can get, or use it to farm metal so that you can buy new parts for the robot in the shop. Now, after you beat the game, there is quite a lot of post-game content. Personally, I don't think the post-game alone should bump the price up to $60, as it gives some new stuff in the story mode and also adds a new mode in the main menu. I'm not too thrilled with what that new mode had to offer. Maybe you guys will be different, but I personally think that it kind of feels like padding to me. Overall, I think Sonic Superstars is amazing, and I definitely think you should pick it up. Probably rent it or wait for it to go on sale, because $60 does seem like it's a bit much. Also, if you're playing it on the Switch, get ready for the occasional really long loading time. Sometimes the characters would just stand there and the game would have to load in the next act, which was particularly annoying when it seemed like sometimes they seamlessly flowed into each other. Otherwise, the game runs really well, even if it doesn't look and sound very great, and it plays just like you would expect a classic Sonic game to. I don't know if it'll be as good as, like, say, a Mario game or Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze. I'd probably have to think about it. But it is still a great time. If you're a classic Sonic fan, you'll probably have an incredible time, as it feels like one of those games, but with a lot of modern touches and no more of those stupid lives. Thank goodness. So with that, thank you very much for watching. Special thanks to my patrons Matthew Rakowski, Spoongo Splatcat, and Scrooterdoodles for supporting me on Patreon. The link will be in the description if you want to support me as well. Let me know down in the comments if you have any questions or what you think of the review. I do read and respond to pretty much every comment that I get, so looking forward to hearing from you. And until the next time, remember to keep the faith, stay epic, and God bless. Bye!